Today is February 2nd, 2021, and in this video, I will continue upon what I started talking about in yesterday's video. Yesterday, I made a video talking about what COVID-19.healthdata.org is projecting will happen in the next few months regarding several different metrics relating to the spread of COVID-19. Now, in yesterday's video, I talked about the worldwide projections, as in the projections that this website made for the worldwide numbers, but there was one thing that I forgot to talk about in that video, so I'm going to talk about that now, and then after that, I will start talking about the projections that this website has made for the United States. So the thing I forgot to talk about in yesterday's video, was the number of tests that have been done over time, and the number of tests that this website projects that will be done in the next few months per day. So back in like August of 2020, around 3.5 million COVID-19 tests were being given per day, and at this point in time, it's now around 7 million tests per day actually. But this model projects that in the upcoming months, that number will continue to increase, and that by May 1st, 2021, that number will be around 8 million tests per day. So by May of 2021, around 8 million COVID-19 tests will be given per day, and at this point in time, it's a bit over 7 million, so it's really not that much of an increase, but it's still good that we're getting more testing done, and it's good that we've gotten a lot more testing done in the last few months compared to like the spring and summer of 2020. So I thought I would just talk about that since I didn't talk about that in yesterday's video, but now let's get to the United States numbers. So that daily infection and testing metric that I just talked about, that was for the global number of tests done per day. But let's get to the United States numbers now, because I was going to talk about that in yesterday's video, but I didn't have enough time for that, so I'm going to talk about it now. So now I'm going to talk about all the different metrics I talked about in yesterday's video, but instead of talking about the worldwide numbers for these things, the worldwide projections, I'm instead going to talk about now the projections for the United States that this website makes for the next 3 months, because this website projects what these things will be like by May 1st, 2021, which I guess now is just under 3 months, but yesterday it was exactly 3 months from then. So let's get into it now. So for reference, currently the United States is at around 27 million COVID-19 cases in total, and at around 457,000 deaths in total. And the first thing I'm going to talk about now is the total deaths, and I'm going to talk about what this model projects for the next 3 months. So, like I said, currently we're at 457,000 COVID-19 deaths in total throughout this pandemic. By the way, every single one of those 457,000 deaths in the United States, they have all taken place in the past year, because exactly a year ago on February 2nd, 2020, there hadn't yet been any COVID-19 deaths. In the United States, people didn't start dying from COVID-19 until the very end of February and the start of March, but already by the middle of May 2020, just around 3 months after the first COVID-19 deaths even took place, the United States was already at 100,000 deaths. A few months later, in September of 2020, so 4 months after we crossed the 100,000 death threshold, we then hit 200,000 deaths in the United States, and 3 months later, again in December, we crossed the 300,000 death threshold. So you can maybe sense a pattern here. 3 months to get to 100,000 deaths, 3 more months to get to 200,000, and then 3 more months to get to 300,000. So after 9 months of COVID-19 deaths taking place, you have 300,000 deaths. But after this is when things start to really speed up. This is when things start to get much, much worse for COVID-19. And this virus gets much deadlier in the United States, because only a month after we crossed the 300,000 death threshold do we once again have 100,000 more people die of COVID-19. A few weeks ago, at this point it's a few weeks ago, in the middle of January 2021, we crossed the 400,000 death threshold. The United States crossed the 400,000 COVID-19 death threshold sometime in the middle of January, and we're already at 457,000. So just since the middle of January, we've had another 57,000 COVID-19 deaths. That just shows how deadly this pandemic has been in the last 2 months, especially. I just wanted to put all of this into context before I start talking about the future projection that this model makes, because you crossed 100,000 in May, you crossed 200,000 in September, you crossed 300,000 in December, but December is when the daily death count started to increase massively, and because of that, it only took another month to get an additional 100,000 COVID-19 deaths in the United States. It's really disturbing to think about how deadly this virus truly has been throughout this entire pandemic, but especially in the last few months when you started seeing that massive increase in the daily death count. Right now we're at 457,000, and this model projects that we're going to cross 500,000 deaths sometime in late February. So by the end of this month, we're already going to be at 500,000 deaths. Probably in the last week of February is when we would cross 500,000 deaths. So this model projects that we would cross 500,000 deaths on February 24th or February 25th, which is only 3 weeks from now, actually. So just 3 weeks from now, we're going to go from 457,000 deaths to 500,000 deaths. Now, there's actually a few different projections that this graph makes. I talked about it in yesterday's video. There's the standard projection, but then there's also the projection that this model makes if a mutation that spreads more easily starts to become dominant. And then it also gives a worst case scenario, and it also gives a scenario in which universal masks are implemented. I guess that would be the best case scenario here. So all four of these different projections, they all have the 500,000 death threshold at around February 24th or 25th, 2021. But then as you go on and on in the next few months, as more time progresses from now, these projections start to diverge more. So the best case scenario projection predicts that by May 1st, 2021, we're going to be at 562,000 deaths. This is the scenario in which universal masks are implemented. And then the worst case scenario line, this projects that worst case scenario by May 1st, 2021, we're going to be at 651,000 COVID 19 deaths, that the United States will be at 651,000 total COVID 19 deaths throughout this pandemic. So that's the worst case scenario. And then there's this scenario in which a COVID 19 mutation that spreads more easily, that starts to become dominant in the United States. And in that scenario, we would be at 618,000 deaths, COVID 19 deaths by May 1st, 2021. And then there's just the standard projection that this model gives, and that projects that we would be at around 594,000 deaths by May 1st, 2021. So I guess in 3 months from now, we're going to be at almost 600,000 COVID 19 deaths in total, which seems very alarming to me. The fact that the trend of a pretty high daily death count will continue, the trend that we've been seeing for the past 2 months, the fact that this looks like it's going to continue in the next 3 months, that's just very alarming to me. And I'm really hoping that this model is an overestimation and not underestimation, meaning that I hope that we're below 594,000 deaths by May 1st, 2021 in the United States. To be exact, it says 594,623 COVID 19 deaths, so hopefully we're well below that, or at least somewhat below that. Hopefully we can get maybe even below 550,000, but the best case scenario here is 563,000 deaths by May 1st, so I don't think getting below 550,000 deaths is likely by May 1st, 2021. But hey, maybe the vaccine will start to have a pretty significant impact on the daily death count in 3 months from now. We'll have to see. And then this model also projects the daily death count, which I was just talking about. So for the past few weeks, the United States has had around 3,000 COVID 19 deaths per day, sometimes even more than that, sometimes it even reaches 4,000 deaths per day. I think the all time high was around 4,000 COVID 19 deaths in a single day. But this model, in all four of the projections from best case to worst case scenario, all four of these models project a decrease in the daily death count in the next few months, which is definitely good news. Worst case scenario, according to this model, we're going to have around 2,300 deaths per day by May 1st, 2021, 2,300, 2,400 deaths per day. Universal masks, if that gets implemented, then the best case scenario would be only 481 deaths per day. But to me, that honestly sounds too good to be true, as much as I would like the daily death count to be that low. To me, that seems a bit too good to be true for the daily death count to decrease by that much in just 3 months when it's already really high. And when we're still seeing more than 3,000 deaths per day, and we've been seeing that for the past almost 2 months at this point. Then there's the projection for if a mutation that spreads more easily becomes dominant, and that projection predicts that by May 1st, 2021, we'll have around 1,500 deaths per day, which is still a pretty big improvement compared to where we're at now. But then the normal projection, I think this is actually pretty good news. It projects that we're only going to be at around 987 deaths per day by May 1st, 2021, which is only around a third of what we're currently experiencing, because at this point in time, we're currently experiencing around 3,000 deaths per day. Often we experience more than 3,000 deaths per day, so reducing the daily death count by two-thirds from around 3,000 to only around 1,000, that is still a pretty big improvement, and that would definitely be something I would be happy about. I mean, Obviously, I would rather it be like 400 or 500 or even less than that, but that seems a bit too unrealistic to me. The 1,000 deaths per day, that seems a bit more realistic to me, especially considering the fact that in the next few months, more and more people will start having access to the COVID-19 vaccine. So hopefully we can get to below 1,000 deaths per day by May 1st, 2021. We'll see. Now for hospital bed resource usage, currently we're at 115,000 beds needed in total for COVID-19 treatments. But this model projects that number to go down in the next few months. This model projects that by May 1st, 2021, we're only going to need around 42,000 beds for COVID-19 treatments. But then there's also the ICU beds needed. Currently, we need around 26,000 ICU beds, but this model projects that that number will go down slightly in the next 3 months to around 10,000 ICU beds needed by May 1st, 2021. I guess it's actually a pretty substantial decrease then. And then there's also the invasive ventilators needed. Currently, we need around 14,500 of those, but this model projects that to go down to only around 5,116 invasive ventilators needed by May 1st, 2021. So, all of this I think is good news. The fact that all of these metrics are projected to decrease pretty substantially in the upcoming months, I think that's definitely great news. I think that it's great that it looks like COVID-19 is going to get a lot better in the United States in the upcoming months. Let's talk about daily infections and testing now. So the daily case count was actually at its worst earlier this month when we were consistently seeing the daily case count be over 200,000. But it looks like in the past few weeks the daily case count has actually decreased by quite a bit. Now we're only seeing around 150,000 cases per day, so there's definitely been a pretty noticeable decrease there. The thing with this model, the model that this website has for daily infections for the number of cases per day, the thing with that is that it includes cases that aren't actually tested for. Because the thing about COVID-19 is that the number of reported COVID-19 cases is always going to be lower than the actual number of COVID-19 cases. And the reason for that is because not everybody that actually gets COVID-19 ends up getting tested for it. Some people don't even notice that they have COVID-19 because they're asymptomatic, but they still, nonetheless, have an infection. And that is why the daily case count is always going to be less on paper than what it really is. But this model actually projects what the total daily case count will be, not just the reported ones. And that's why it may seem that this model is significantly overestimating the daily case count in the next few months, but it's actually just factoring in the fact that a lot of people that get COVID-19 don't actually get tested for it, and some people don't even know that they have it. So this model projects that worst case scenario we have around 230,000 cases per day by May 1st, 2021. Like I said, the number of reported cases is not going to be that much, even in the worst case scenario, but this model projects that that would be the total number of cases per day in 3 months from now. Best case scenario is actually only 47,000 cases per day. This is the universal mask scenario, only 47,000 cases per day, which means that the reported number of cases per day would be even lower than 47,000 because 47,000 in this model includes the unreported cases. So that sounds like really good news to me, but once again, that's the best case scenario. Then there's the scenario in which a mutation that spreads more easily starts to become dominant, and that projection predicts that by May 1st, 2021, we'll have 145,000 cases per day. But the standard projection that this model is making is that if you include the unreported cases, then in total, we're going to have around 101,000 cases per day in 3 months from now on May 1st, 2021. So now let's talk about number of tests per day. So throughout this pandemic, the number of tests done per day has pretty consistently improved, and it's actually projected to continue to improve in the upcoming months, although not by much. Currently, we have around 1.6 million tests done per day, 1.65 million tests done per day in the United States. That number is projected to increase to 1.76 million COVID-19 tests being performed per day throughout the United States. So that's by May 1st, 2021. So that's still good that we're expected to see a slight increase in the amount of testing done, but I kind of wish it would be a bit more, but let's see what happens. Now for mask usage, that's actually expected to go down in the next few months. Currently, the observed mask usage is at around 76%, which is actually at an all-time high compared to the mask usage percentage in the past few months. But by May 1st, 2021, mask usage is only projected to be at around 66%. Finally, let's talk about social distancing. I talked about this yesterday. This website is actually able to use cell phone mobility data to make projections on how much social distancing is expected to be done in the next few months. Currently, there's 33% less mobility now than there would be without the pandemic, but this model predicts that mobility in the United States will only go up by a little bit in the next few months from the negative 33% we're currently at to around negative 29% by May 1st, 2021, which means that in 3 months from now, the mobility in the United States is projected to be 29% less than if there was no pandemic.